Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. In this video on seed starting indoors, I'm going to go over how you set up the peat pellet kits that you can buy in stores. Sometimes you're not starting a whole lot of vegetables. You might want to get some tomatoes and peppers out there, maybe some basil. You might just use a setup like this. You don't need to buy the starting mix. Everything comes in a kit. We'll go over using the dome, which I don't really recommend for indoors, but I'm going to show you how to use a kit like this to start seeds outdoors. You don't even need to use grow lights. So when you buy the kits, you're going to get compressed peat moss pellets. Sometimes it's cocoa coir. I've showed you how to use boiling water on your seed starting mixes to really prevent fungus gnats from hatching from the eggs that are in there. The risk of the gnat eggs being in here is pretty low because they're dry, they're compressed, and without moisture the eggs do die off. But I do recommend hydrating your pellets with hot water. Make sure you use a container that can take the heat, and I just drop them in there. Add in your boiling water. If you don't want to go through the boiling water process, that's fine. Just use warm water. Cold water absorbs more slowly, and you can see how quickly they'll inflate. I'm going to let that cool off, do the other ones, and then I'll just show you how we set up the tray, talk about how we can start peppers and tomatoes in here and really just transition these trays in and out of the house if you don't want to use grow lights. Just a couple of tips. These are the larger peat pellets. I put the smaller ones down there, and when you look at them, the top is open here. That's where the seeds are going to go, and usually on the smaller ones it's sealed on the bottom, so you know which way to put them. The larger pellets are going to expand to a really good size, so you don't want to put in all 16 into a container this size, and something maybe the size you put in 6 or 8, so when you add in the water they expand to full size, and usually there's holes on both sides. These are better if you don't want to have to kind of pot up your transplants. A tomato or pepper started in here 6 to 10 weeks before it can go outside can actually probably stay in this size. If you're starting tomatoes in something smaller like this, depending on the timing, you may have to put this into a cup or something like that until the frost is away in your area. So once you have everything hydrated, you're just going to put them into the container, and I just did this a few minutes ago. The outside cools off pretty quick, and that's going to be your planting area. Okay, let me set up the rest of this. So this is what your pressed cocoa coir or peat pellets are going to look like. So let's just talk a little bit about the pros and cons. One of the pros to this is that you don't have to buy any starting mix, you don't have to buy any seed cells, you're just getting the pellets, you add water, hydrate them, and you can plant right into it. So if I were going to use these regularly, I don't really like the small ones. I mean, if you can't grow cucumbers in there, squash, they'll start, but there's just not enough material in here. Tomatoes and peppers you could get started, but again, it's not a whole lot of material. These do dry out pretty quickly. I would go for this larger size, and it's 16 planting areas, and that's a good amount of material for your peppers and for your tomatoes, and you could really get some of your larger plants started in here. I don't like the netting. So when I go to plant, I will cut down the side and just break it apart. It doesn't hurt the plant, but I think maybe it might constrict the roots a little bit. Eventually the root systems come out of here, but they don't break down like they tell you. I mean, they'll break down in a couple of years, but not within that planting time. You're also going to get green algae on here, which doesn't come from the pellets itself. It often comes in the water that you drink, and there's just algae in there. You only need a cell to get onto here, and it's going to divide, especially if this is under grow lights and it's getting intense light. So you're going to see green on here. That's not a problem, don't worry about it. Sometimes you get white mold along here, don't know where it comes from, even if you use the boiling water. Do recommend the boiling water just in case there's problems in here, though the risk is extremely low. That's another benefit to using the pressed dried pellets. They often don't have fungus gnats or problems, but you will get the molds and algae on here. That comes from another place, and it's usually the water you add. So if you don't want to use grow lights, or you don't have grow lights, you can use the domes. I don't recommend the domes when you're growing under the grow lights. It's just not necessary. So what you would do is keep the dome, and you could do this for your seed cells too if you have a dome. Get a rubber band, tie the rubber bands together so that you can make a big one, and then you can stretch it easily over here. Snap it down and it'll keep the lid on. You can bring this outside during the day when the temperatures are above freezing. You can't put this outside when it's freezing, but put it out on a sunny day, a cloudy day, it doesn't matter. As long as it's not freezing, leave it out during the day, bring this in at night. Now the seeds will germinate more slowly that way, but you can germinate seeds without grow lights by just moving them inside and outside. When you bring them inside, your house temperature is 70 degrees. The root systems are going to love the warmth. The plants are going to love the warmth at night. And then you're putting them out during the day so that they can get the sun, the UV rays, and they can, germinate and do their thing. Again, when it's colder out, they're going to grow a little more slowly and germinate a little bit more slowly. But that's an effective way to seed start seeds without having to use grow lights. All right, let me take these upstairs. We'll get to planting some tomatoes and peppers in there. So we're going to start cucumbers, jalapeno peppers, and beefsteak tomato. You can pick these seeds up at my seed shop if you're interested. So labeling these is kind of difficult because you'd have to put a separate label in here, and trust me, if you plant today you're going to remember what's in there, but by tomorrow, if you're like me, you're going to forget. So the easiest way to do it is to put a piece of tape in each corner. So you put a piece of tape there, a piece of tape there, and then you just draw a grid. So there's 16 pots here, and we have 16 squares. Put where the tape is, and then that orients you in case the tray gets spun around. And you would just write in the plants that you're planting in there. Before you get started, you want to make sure you open up the netting. Give yourself a nice space to plant. So we'll start with cucumbers. Now, it's too early for cucumbers. It's January 8th here in Maryland, Zone 7. Cucumbers like the warm weather, so you want to start your cucumbers in the larger compressed pellets. They will not do well in something like this. They're a big seed, big root system, big leaves. They want to go into the ground when it's warm, and the ground is really 60 degrees. You're in 80-degree days, so you want to time this so that your plants, after germination, once they germinate, sometimes germination can be a couple of days, sometimes it can be longer, but once they germinate, within 3 or 4 weeks after germination, they would go into the ground. And that's how you figure out the timing for cucumbers. And I always recommend put in 2 seeds. You're going to thin after they come up. After about a week, thin to the strongest plant. Drop them right into the middle. And then I like using a popsicle stick. Loosen up the area, and you want to get that down about 1/2 inch. Scrape from the outer side. And just get the cucumber seeds down about 1/2 inch. The depth, the exact depth is not critical. They're going to germinate at 1/4 inch or 1 inch deep. Again, dig a hole, get them down about 1/2 inch. Scrape some of the core or peat moss from the sides, and that's your cucumbers. They're set up. Again, just make sure they're in the soil surface. Peppers, we're going to do the jalapenos, and you would do the same for the smaller peat pellets. These are going to have to be watered a lot more than your standard cells because they have all the surface area on top and on the sides, so they're going to dry out quickly. And I would rather use larger pellets and water less. 2 seeds. Pepper seeds can be started indoors 8 to 12 weeks before they would go outside. Your sweet peppers tend to germinate sooner than the hot peppers for whatever reason. So it depends on the variety. But they like to get into warm temperatures again, 50 to 60 degree nights to start, and 70 to 80 degree days. So they don't do well in frost. You're going to get these down at least 1/4 inch, and you're going to thin them to a single plant. And they can't take the frost. That's why you're timing it so that they go out into the ground when it's not just when the frost is gone, but also when the ground at night is warmer. When you're having warm rains during the day, there's a seed that's up about 1/4 of an inch. If you put these out when the nights are like, 40-degree nights, the soil temperature isn't warm enough, the days aren't warm enough, they're just going to sit there and stagnate. So you don't get a benefit of putting them out early. Time it so that within 8 to 12 weeks after germination, you're getting them into warm nights and warm days. And then we're going to do just the beefsteak tomato. Same setup as the pepper. You can time tomatoes to get out into the garden 6 to 8 weeks. Again, when the nights and the soil temperatures are about 50 degrees, try and put about 2 seeds into each one. Again, you get a thinness. And tomatoes go down 1/4 of an inch. You can see you don't have to be perfect. And then scrape some from the side. And you're timing again the tomatoes to go out into the garden about 6 or 8 weeks after germination. So that's the basic way that you would set up seed starting in these types of pellets. They're going to work perfectly fine under your grow lights. You can use what I described to move them in and out. If you're moving them in and out of the house, again, they're going to germinate slower and grow more slowly. So that time frame that I gave you might be a little more on the higher end. So I wanted to cut in real quick, talk about getting these started under your grow lights. I actually added oregano seeds to all these smaller ones. I'll talk about that in a future video. As you wait for germination, you want the lights to be 1 to 3 inches above your seed starts, above the soil line right here. When they break the surface, they'll be hit by intense light. They're going to do well, and you want to leave them under here after germination, anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the variety. Get them a lot of light early. And up here you can see the setup is about 3 inches. That's because these lights are more intense. Let me give you an example. So these have been in here for almost 3 weeks. They're ready to get moved, but you can see how they're nice and stocky, lots of leaves, and they're doing really, really well because they're getting that 16 to 18 hours worth of light. If you ever see plants that get really thin, tall, leggy, they look like they're reaching, well they are, they're reaching for the light. They're just not healthy plants. Intense light, really close, 16 to 18 hours, waiting for germination, and then 1 to 3 weeks after germination. Once they're established, you can move them over to something like this or raise your lights up. You can go to 6 to 8 inches above the lights and cut down the amount of time the lights are on to 12 to 14 hours. It's really up to you. These are general guidelines, but you're much better to err on more light at germination so you don't have tall, leggy, scraggly looking plants. Hope you enjoyed the video and it gives you some ideas of how to use this type of setup for starting seeds. I highly recommend it. You'll save a lot of money. This was maybe $7 for the setup. I'm sorry, this one was probably, let me just think. This was $4 or $5, and I think this was $7 to $9. So it's not a lot of money. And when you go and buy transplants at stores, they're usually $2, $3, $4 each. So you can just see how much you would save. Again, thanks for watching. Please follow my series on seed starting indoors for 2020. I will show you how I take care of these plants and get them out into the garden. Thanks for watching.